So this is an interview or a conversation with Zsófi now, and she already promised me that she's going to behave. So we have not 100%, like it will be super exciting, but probably she's not going to run around naked, or I don't know what she would normally do. But I'm very happy to have you in this conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm also very excited.
And yeah, this is a next conversation around the series of inquiring temples and the different perspectives of what could be a temple. And Zsófi, tell me again how to pronounce your name.
Yeah, it's very fun actually. So it's basically the name Zsófi, but it's the Hungarian version. So the ZS together make a J sound. It's actually one letter. And a good way to remember this, because there's no English words and I think also not German words starting with this J sound, it's in the word pleasure. So pleasure, Zsófi.
This is really good.
Yes, very good.
Okay,
the best I could come up with.
Yeah. So she is, you are facilitating temples already for some time in Berlin. And yeah, I'm kind of curious, do you want to lay out a bit your temple life or your temple history? How did it touch you first, and why, and what is your work about right now?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. Basically, how it touched me was by being a participant at first in many temples. First, already in my tantra background, when I was getting really interested in sexuality and learning a lot about. First, I went into tantra from yoga aspect, and then the whole sexuality realm touched me deeply, and I had a lot of healing in these places. And at some point along the journey, I started experiencing temples, and I realized, wow, this is an incredible way to learn about myself, to just bring more awareness into my history, but also into the presence very much. And from there also what I can consciously really call in for my future, how I want my healing journey to be. So I had some years of attending temples, and then I also started realizing more and more what I was lacking or how I would prefer these spaces to be. And that was actually the impulse and the sort of the initiation in me to step into leading the spaces, also along with a community member that I shared lives with closely here, and she's a woman, and we have a very like intimate, loving, but very often also crossing these boundaries of it's also always hard for me to say what is actually sexual, because that's a big question, but we have a very touchy and sweet and sensual and sometimes sexual friendship. And yeah, and together we just thought, hey, let's actually create the temple we would want to go to. And that's how it all started. It was almost exactly 3 years ago. I think September will be 3 years. Yeah.
So you kind of did already temples for 1 year before we met in Tamera.
Yeah, but we also didn't do them so regularly at the time. It was more sporadic, like trying it out. And yeah, and then I also held that temple at Tamera. I don't remember actually if you were part of it.
No, I was not there. I'm this lazy person who doesn't take in too much, so I was not there.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, or I'm inquiring this. Yeah, I would love you to go on over the question of, like you said, that the temples that you've experienced until you started were kind of interesting and gave you a lot of insights about yourself, but they were lacking some qualities that you then included into your own temples. And what were the qualities that you were lacking that you were kind of focused or integrated into the work that you did afterwards?
Yeah, it's also really evolved in these years. I realized that now as you ask this question, that initially the big thing for me was actually like just the desire for more contact and more integration space afterwards, which for us, the first temple was a 24-hour temple where you really, after the temple space was closed, you still had the chance to be humans together, essentially, to eat a meal, to sing, to go to the sauna, to go to sleep in whichever constellation or form you wish, and then wake up together and then actually have a check-in and to just honestly and vulnerably be able to share like, hey, you know, for me it was really difficult, I felt alone, or so on, or celebrate whatever experience you had, but to not be alone with the aftermath of what happened in these spaces. And yeah, that was the initial impulse, but then we realized also it's not so easy to get people out of the city when they don't know you as a facilitator. And even though this first one was super beautiful and very, very intimate in other realms than just body and physical contact. And so that kind of remained the thread throughout the rest of the temples that then we began holding in the city, in Berlin, to make it more accessible and easier for people to attend. So it's about like a 5-hour space. But we really carry this this vision of like vulnerability actually very much, and yeah, and just like an emotional intimacy and like a connection beyond the body to really cultivate depth and to know that these spaces so often, you know, trigger older wounds in us and so on, and to already come with the awareness and to invite like explorations around your patterns around these topics of sexuality and even relating and so on. It's always a bit different what we're exploring, but there's always like a bit of research happening there that we're kind of consciously going into into exploring. And with that exploration, when you're showing up in front of someone with these moments of actually not knowing, you know, you don't really even know what you're going to uncover about yourself, that really creates an intimacy that's then supporting the intimacy of the bodies coming together. And so that's been sort of what's very different from most other temples that I have attended and that I see now present and happening in Berlin as well. And it's really incredible that that people super appreciate this. Like I've had conversations with people who couldn't understand how these two can go together. Like how can, you know, talking about like painful, possibly uncomfortable parts of you in front of someone then support an intimate like physical connection. Like how is that possible? and it's really great, actually. It goes so well together, and it creates actually more of a group field rather than, you know, people coupling up for example, or just yeah, that's somehow my biggest cringe is when that starts happening. I'm like, we want to, you know, weave the field, and I think that this really supports that actually very much.
Like getting emotionally naked in front of the whole group somehow, or like with the whole group together.
Yeah, and often it doesn't happen like in front of the whole group. It's often in smaller groups, but then, you know, you keep moving and you're experiencing that in front of many people, and it becomes, yeah, it becomes like a sense of being seen in front of quite a big part of the group.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
really like that we had this conversation already about like ranting about the coupling up in campus, and how in my experience I often like when I see that happening, that a lot of the whole like a lot of the group is kind of just coupling up, like getting somebody and then just staying with that person, kind of holding on to them for the whole evening. I feel like, whoa, the safety didn't happen, or like the ease of really being in contact with the whole group somehow didn't happen. I don't know. I have this story around like so something kind of did go wrong in how to build up the group field.
Yeah. And it's also, you know, wrong, right? It's hard to say. It's what's needed for that moment. I also noticed that like there's like a bit of seasonal thing to it. Like in the winter months, people like to couple up a bit more and, you know, maybe like hold on to someone to take home and get cozy with. And it's also human nature, you know, sometimes that's just what's supporting and nourishing you the most. But for sure, it's just so rewarding for me to see when the group is really open and really inclusive, you know, really keeping like always aware of what's happening on the outside, and somehow wants to be together and wants to in a sincere way take care of the group field, you know, like everyone feels some very sincere responsibility to hold it together in some way, not out of having to or so on, but just comes in a natural way. And that I feel really goes well together with this like emotional intimacy and the vulnerability that we create beforehand, that invites that kind of awareness.
Yeah, I really love this. Also, what you said about like that some people are coming to you and they say like, okay, emotional awareness and showing like the places where I might be overwhelmed with myself, and then how does that link to sexuality or something like that. And I'm also quite interested in those gaps that people sometimes have in their system around like, how does love and lust go together? Kind of that there are places where those experiences are separated. Like there is no love in lust, or there is no lust in love, or something like that. And it reminded me on that, because there is no, I don't know, no sexuality in vulnerability, or in the more complicated spaces around us. I like it. And then to kind of weave it together and create a new experience, and then kind of gift other people that, yeah, this is happening, and look, it's happening. And then they can go home and they experience something totally different.
Yeah, and what I find is it's actually like it's more nourishing in this way. That's what I see, people walking away like almost kind of like a surprise, like, wow, I didn't know that it can be so nourishing to actually cry in a group space, and then not be stuck in that also, but to allow it to move into celebration and pleasure and all. And for me, this is exactly what the EROS energy is inviting us into. It's to bridge these gaps, to bring together these separations we've created between pleasure and pain and so on. And it's for me very much this like energy of just wanting to grow and move forward, and like a wine that's, you know, twisting on everything. It's just like covering everything in this energy of like let's grow, let's go through. It's like the throughness, you know, you can't avoid anything because it's all part of the deal. It's all part of it.
What is something that you are kind of, I don't know how to ask this question yet, so let me try. You said that you're also inviting inquiries around like patterns and that we might be with, or that like strategies that we have around creating intimacy or like going into sexuality, and that you create spaces that inquire that, like that invite people, participants to look at themselves and be like, whoa, this is what's happening here. And what are like your main places that you love people to invite? Like what kind of questions do you love to ask people in an exercise or in an inquiry?
I guess like the most rewarding thing is when someone touches a place that they haven't touched before. That's always the most nourishing. So for me, it's always kind of an art actually to take myself into the state like the days before, or sometimes it starts longer before, to really start creating the not only the theme, because that often is already set earlier, but to really like inquire in myself, what are the ways that I can inquire deeper. And then I sort of apply it to myself and then bring it into these spaces. And I just actually love doing this, even for others with other kinds of workshops and so on. It's like my main form of creativity these days is to sort of like dive into a group, if so far imaginary when I'm just, you know, doing it beforehand, but then also it always shifts in the moment to sort of just like tune into creative ways of bringing more awareness, bringing really this throughness energy. Like, how can we go through the parts that we normally don't even see, don't even want to look at? So it's hard for me to say like specific questions now. It's also not always just a question. It's sometimes a lot more embodied. And I also at one point really enjoyed creating like constellations with the questions, where, you know, one part of the room would represent something and the other part something else, and then you can really intuitively, without even really needing to know an answer, just place your body somewhere and then reflect in that way, and like, wow, okay, actually there's this in me that I am maybe not so in contact with, not so much in connection with, and to start. I think whatever can start these questions to then continue in the people. Like I feel like I'm just kind of like the spark, and then it unravels more and more. And so it's hard to say specific questions, but I'm not even sure if that's exactly what you asked for, like what kind of questions. I can try to go back to something, or maybe go to the future of the one coming up in 3 weeks. For example, one thing that was explored a few times in different temples was like the different ways we are intimate, you know, like what intimacy even means, and then to bring awareness to like intimacy on a mental level, intimacy on an emotional level, of course, intimacy on a spiritual level. Like, what does it mean actually to be intimate spiritually, and how, like, and which ones are calling you more, which ones are you more afraid of? Fear is something that I really like to explore and invite questions on, because I think that that's a best direction to start going through. Yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I like it.
Mm.
It was like, well, I want to also come to a space and inquire something.
Please come whenever you're here. You come visit my community and then you
Yes,
join the temple. Yeah.
I there was also this question in my system around what is one of the like the experiences that stuck most in your system from your previous temples, either when you facilitated or when you experienced the temple by yourself? Like, what is an experience that is still like somehow vibrating in yourself and kind of still alive? Like, maybe has a lot of energy or has a lot of shift. I don't know. Like, and why is it still there? Probably, if you know, it's.
I'm not so super sure if it's still here. It is in the way that I'm continuing to build myself on top of these experiences. Two things came to my mind to share, and it's, I think, great because one is more of like the negative experience or just the one that you can grow from a lot, and the other one was more really the one that was expansive and yeah, somehow like claiming more freedom in my heart and body. And yeah, and just really briefly, like the first one, I was a participant and I experienced a rejection that was partially even invited directly by me by holding back my like claiming energy or like going for it, because I knew that it was wanted and desired. But as soon as another woman stepped in and really claimed him, I just like backed off, and I felt like I just took the chance away from me for some strange reason. But I knew, and I realized later, that this was exactly the experience I needed to have to then go home and vibrate with this rejection in every cell of my body, to the point where I ended up staying up all night, just reflecting on like all the different ways I have experienced rejection in my life, in previous partnerships, in friendships, in literally like just every detail of all of it. Sorry. And went all the way back to the point of being like a small child and feeling rejected from my father. And this for me was so incredible to see that, you know, one slight experience can give me so much insight from something I don't actually have memory of, because I was like, you know, 1 or 2, but it is in me, and it was the core of what hurt so much. And this definitely is also an inspiration for my own work, having had this experience, to see that it's a great way to learn more about ourselves, learn beyond like what's even consciously in our memories and brains. And then the other experience that felt really expensive, it was a temple I actually held with Vicky from the community. We were asked to do a temple at a festival, and this was new for us, and it was very different and difficult. And at some point, because it's also a festival, we just said, okay, we close now like the part that we're holding, and we will just stay and participate. And this is it now for yeah, us like holding space. And all of a sudden, like it was just incredible to experience this shift and this freedom of kind of, in a way, like enjoying the fruits of the space I created beforehand.
Yeah.
And it was really just simply from dancing by myself. I felt I was just, yeah, stepping into more and more freedom. And it expanding so much beyond me. And I really also took it as like inspiration to see how important it is to not be outside as a space holder, not to just be a space holder, and to bring myself into like the open spaces, because it's super valuable. And I could see the resonance, the activation that I could then from my free body and heart also gift to others, and that was then multiplying in me and getting even bigger, and it was just a really, really blissful and beautiful experience.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it makes me inquire this thing, that the question that I'm always having in the temples that we are holding, where we kind of, as facilitators in the free flow, we always go in and we are very aware of what it does to the space around dynamics and so, but it's really also, yeah, I can see exactly what you're also saying around gifting the space also. Like a lot of people said that they kind of calmed down because they saw me in such a relaxed way, like going through the temple, that it kind of also created somehow a teaching around it. But then there is this other place around not 100% knowing how many people might actually feel unconsciously unsafe because we are going in and kind of not 100% holding in a way, or feeling that we could not be available in it. Yeah. In a way, we feel that we are, but some people have, like, then the stories could build up and stuff. Kind of,
and do you ever just like say that? Because that's what I do now, that before the open space, I just already describe how I will show up in this space, and just share my availability no matter where and how I am, that I am still very much there for them, and at the same time I am also flowing through, and yeah, and I find it's easier to accept it in this way when it's just spelled out and said directly.
Yeah, I think it, yeah, I'm quite often still in doubt somehow, because I know that there are patterns, like I can say something and some, it doesn't 100% touch all the unconscious parts as well, or the strategy, like the identities, or like the places where it gets crunchy. So this is kind of a question that I'm having, but in another way, I see that there is a lot of benefit also from it. And I actually never experience it the other way around, because I was never outside the whole time when the free flow was happening. So I'm kind of yeah, it was very nice to hear you now with that experience, that there was a shift happening. But is it like you're doing it now all the time, that you're always going in, or do you have like a
yeah, it's like a moderation within myself, and a commitment to also not like lose control, which is also very possible when you give yourself over to this EROS flow. But actually, I also have never experienced fully being out, because I also truly believe that I have more to give when I go around and yeah, and sort of like, yeah, with my touch very much also. And so it was in that temple, the what I described, it was more that it went from being in this controlled, moderated state of like, I'm still holding space, I'm still available for you, and I'm going around, to just letting that go completely. And then yeah, and that's what I'm constantly aware of, and seeing how I can let go more and more and still hold the responsibility. And so there's no like clear answer, and I think both are really important actually, because we are directly modeling and transmitting the the arrows that can flow through us in these moments that we have capacity for. And at the same time, we are in a role of responsibility. So it's quite a intricate dance. And I have to say it's probably slightly different every time also for me. How and sometimes I catch myself like, oh, okay, this was maybe a bit too far into the letting go, and okay, maybe, you know, now I could let go a bit more. Like, yeah, it's just also awareness that's constantly kind of tracking where I am in which moment. And yeah, and some part of me just dreams and wishes for those spaces where I can also really be fully free. And yeah, and maybe it's in these ways where I can like officially close it and then continue. Like this really worked well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you find other temples now in Berlin where you feel like, oh, they are actually doing it in the same maybe depth or in integration than how you would want to experience a temple? Or is it still like somehow similar than 3 years ago where you started off with your own way or with, yeah?
No, I don't think to be really honest, I'm going to less and less temples held by others. It feels much more satisfying to hold the space for this medicine than to participate in others where I lack, where I would feel like it's not necessarily enough somehow, or I don't know exactly if it's not enoughness, but as you may have gotten to know me also in Tamara a bit, I definitely have this like depth seeking part of me that is in my Scorpio nature from many angles in my chart. And so, yeah, I've just found more and more that other temples have not satisfied me so much. And so I haven't been going to so many. And when I go, I know like I have a few facilitators that I show up to and go to, and that's fine. And I know what I'm signing up for, and I know it's not my temples. Some part of me would love to experience my temple from a participant role. And yeah, maybe someday, somewhere. Maybe, yeah, I need to just train people to host temples like mine, and then I can show up to those temples.
That sounds like a good plan. I just read a post someone recently about the four trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, and facilitate.
Facilitate. I haven't heard that. That's very great.
Yes, right.
There's probably a lot of reasons for it.
Yeah.
That's funny.
How do you somehow, if you had kind of all the time of the world to prepare people or to be in temple spaces and build up something, where would you actually want to go? Like, what would be an experience that you would love to create if you had all the resources and all the time and all the people and all the readiness? Yeah, available.
Is this a trick question? Somehow community came to me, which is another big passion of mine, living in an intentional community. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm answering this the right way, but I guess this not enoughness and this seeking for the depth in me is essentially just really wanting us to come together and to commit not to each other, but to commit to EROS, I guess, to commit to life, to commit to creating a life that's sort of all inclusive, that's holding the pain, that's celebrating the pleasure, and that's really going through and forward towards a new world of peace, essentially. And so I really trust in my heart that needs community, and the not enoughness is always like, okay, we only have a weekend, or we only have a week, we only have a month, we only have a year-long training.
You don't have a life.
Yeah. And we do have the life, and it's great also to, you know, to see what you can spark in others that they can then take into their lives and continue spreading in a beautiful way. But yeah, somehow community was the answer to your question, you know, this saying also, whatever the question, the answer is community. So I just gave it, and I hope it makes some kind of sense in regards to temples also.
Yes, for sure. I see that temples are, from in my perspective, mainly a community space. They are very, somehow they are too short for my taste as well, but also just celebrating community and the wholeness of who we are, and celebrating all that we are and bringing it into connection. And then for me, kind of this idea that it's about sexuality is kind of just a tool in a way, because there is so much like energy held, but it could be about cooking if there was not so much energy held in sexuality, in my experience.
If cooking was so attractive and sold so many tickets. Maybe it is in some ways. But yeah, I feel the same way. I could do it about gardening. I could do it about sourdough. For me is a very sensual experience. Like, you know, baking bread and the way my sourdough is alive. It's very, you know, I can really sense the eros in anything and everything. As a mother, especially, also it's very, very present in your connection with your child in very innocent and pure ways. And that's essentially also maybe the big vision, is to invite more and more people into that innocence, and to find and let go of all these conditionings and traumas and everything that's around sexuality, to feel its innocence again, to really be playful and open and free in its expression, and in that way also in our expression of pain. You know, I am always in admiration of children expressing pain. It's not a question. They don't censor it. They don't, you know, care if it's emotional pain or if they're bleeding. They scream the same way. You know, I never know if my son is right now screaming because he has a broken arm, or he's screaming because his feelings are hurt. It sounds exactly just the same severe, I am in pain and I need you to resource me. I need your support. And yeah, for me, this is also eros, and also part of life, and also part of what we need to look at more. So actually, as much as pleasure is a direction, I really very much find that holding our pain, and especially bringing that into community context, to really like create the transparency and the courage to be able to like support each other in the unique flavors of how we hold the pain of the world, is just as important. And it goes in both directions very much. You know, the more pleasure we want to experience, we also really need to include the pain. It's a spectrum. We can't just go in one direction. Then the pain will come and slap us across the face in maybe ways we don't necessarily want. Or I mean, I guess we never really want the pain. So that's why it's a good idea to pay attention to where it's there anyway. And yeah.
Yeah, I can totally go with that. This balance of the more pain we can hold, or the more pain we can allow, the more pleasure is unlocked in our system. And love as well. I feel like I can hold myself more, and I can also resonate much more with other people and go into a flow of connection when I've actually like integrated more of the places that I didn't want to look at in the first place, or I didn't want to see. And I really love how you're pointing that out as well, and that it's part of your temples in a way. It feels very like soft, like your temples feel in a way soft in holding this balance. And without knowing how they are, but just in the way how you speak and your energy, and that it's kind of a lightness in balancing those two places.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope we get to exchange experiences in each other's temples soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's definitely exactly that, you know, this vulnerability that I invite in is essentially to hold both ends of the spectrum, or to at least invite like a widening, not that we get to the ends of anything. Yeah.
Is there anything missing from our conversation? Something that you would love to add or still talk about around like the essence of a temple for you, or what's your main, does something feel missing for you at the moment?
I'm somehow just having this inclusivity aspect come in, that's I think some people have ideas of who a temple is for and who it's not for, and sometimes they place themselves like, oh, it's not for me, and so on. And yeah, and I'm not sure I believe that, because some part of me really wants it to be just like wide openly inclusive, to just really have everyone believe that they have a part in a temple. And I believe that because essentially, you know, I would like to live in a temple. I would like life to be a temple, and from beginning to end, and live in a ceremonial way. That's essentially what it also really brings for me, to make life a ritual and to come more and more into the presence. And with that said, I just want to encourage this invitation to feel invited. I want to encourage people to feel invited to show up to these spaces with whatever. Like, I think that's the best part about it, that you can really show up with whatever is present. You can, you know, cry the whole night in a temple. You can laugh. You can experience pleasure, you can experience pain, you can really just experience more presence, and to really feel more and more permission to not only like be yourself, but to also be yourself in front of others, to be part of a community, essentially the community that is being created for this evening or for a weekend or whatever it is, but to really take that courageous leap to show up and try it and be part of it, and to then like spread this medicine of feeling included, even in your pain, even if you're having like a terrible night, you know, went through it and you stayed as part of the group, and you can maybe even feel it as an important part of the group, that you were there with your pain. And yeah, and I really believe that supports this inclusivity to spread wider and wider when you experience it. And yeah, I don't know, that was just the piece that I felt like sharing as I tuned in.
Yeah, inclusivity.
Mm.
It's like I have some throat ache. That's why I'm doing this face. That this is very dear to me as well, and I have a lot of questions around how to do that properly, because I feel like sometimes it works and sometimes there is still like kind of a mountain that in a group that's hard to cross, or for sure hard to cross in one evening or in one event, around like our conditioning or patterning of who am I as a sexual being, and who do I include or exclude as a sexual being in a way, or then essential or whatever, a being that I would meet in a sensual or in a body contact. And yeah, I'm kind of curious how to include people, how to include people that would normally be excluded, like kind of the groups that we sometimes are excluding in society are like older people. They don't have sex. Like in our thoughts, we kind of think that older people, that they don't have sex anymore. And then when older people are coming into the space, they always feel a bit like, am I too old for this crowd? And then they kind of exclude themselves, and sometimes also the group itself excludes them. Or also people with neurodiversion, or people with, I don't know, who don't really look sexy in a way that
It can be
society
anything.
that's sexy. It
We're
can
very
go
good at
anywhere. That's true.
exactly. We're very good at excluding ourselves and finding how we're different and for what reasons we don't belong. It can be, you know, my hairy armpit, or it could be being overweight, or it could really be anything. I find that it's a big topic in the world. It's a big topic in our community. You know, the single mom feels alone for that. The old person feels alone for that. I feel alone for not speaking German. It's always, you know, some reason why we are different and no one understands us and we don't belong. And yeah, I think partially what helps is to actually really be with that pain, to really like bring more and more awareness in the ways that we experience it in our unique ways. And then partially as a space holder, I think like the capacity that you can really be inclusive with your eros, and yeah, and to just like bring that into the space, I think it really makes a difference.
Yeah, it clicks for people sometimes, like, oh wow, you do this. This I already experienced, and then it makes a difference.
Because eros flows, you know, eros flows between any two beings, between plants and humans, and any two humans, of course. And so I truly trust that when you're just really present with yourself and you're in front of another being, eros wants to move something, whatever it is, even if it's a repulsion. There is a way through that. I can't tell you what it is, but eros wants to move through that. I just full-heartedly believe that, and so I am one of these beings that when I am in this state, I can express eros with any being, because it's beyond me somehow, almost. It's like full presence with life, and it's healing very much. It's also my way of serving the world. So it's easy for me, and I know it's not the case, and I don't expect people to get into that, because it's also a fine line of like, okay, you can, you know, lose yourself in that and perhaps cross your boundaries without like being aware enough. It's definitely a complex thing, and I it's not like the direction I guide, but I think that definitely just believing that on one level, the belief is already like powerful, but then also really bringing it in the capacity that I carry it in is very much felt in the space. And it's very much also an invitation and a permission to go in that direction without pushing anyone, because I think that can be dangerous. And yeah, and I find that also the vulnerability actually invites this to some degree, because it invites you into your heart. It invites like an aspect of the soul, a connection on the soul level, and that definitely supports the EROS to flow more freely between souls, and not necessarily between the two bodies that are maybe not liking each other's smells or whatever the bodies have happening. The souls are connecting already in a different way, and they're wanting to merge because they remember our oneness, and they're just excited to find the ways that we can find more connection and more closeness.
This is really nice to hear this from you. It's very beautiful. Yeah, I can totally agree to like not pushing and still knowing that this is possible, or this is actually, I don't want to put it in the way of like, this is exactly how EROS works, because it feels a bit like, who am I to know in a way, but I've experienced it in a way, in that way as well, where I feel like all the ways in which we don't want to connect, or we don't allow ourselves to connect to somebody or to a group, are kind of conditioned, or trauma, or separations, and a normal state feels like in connection and in vibration and in co-creation with everything somehow, or in synergy, or how I don't know all the names that would describe this, but it's really nice but I was not aware that you're kind of having this similar perspective, and now I feel like this is nice.
Yeah, I actually still remember at Tamara that you asked a question around this, and I was like, we need to connect over this topic, because it's I have a lot of passion and fire to meet people also who share this. It's really it's exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting, because quite often I feel like a bit alone in that. I'm like I'm kind of quite often meeting a wall or a resistance around like, what, I have to have sex with everybody, or something like that. And like it's I feel like there is not so much resonance in that from that perspective, of like, this could be possible with everybody, or it's actually meant to be possible with everybody somehow. And so that was very nice to hear you talk about it in your own words.
Yeah, and I think it's just the relationship and the evolution of like how EROS, how we experience EROS. I think that it's sort of a big learning that she is infusing in us very much, and it's super spiritual if you really want to piece it together, because it is essentially acknowledging and holding this piece of our interconnectedness and our oneness at the head of it. And that's also, it's really beautiful, and it's really it touches my heart very much, and I feel incredible gratitude to be blessed to experience EROS in this way. It's really it's a blessing in life, for sure. And it's also a responsibility to spread this medicine, this I just see how easy it is to kind of, it's like contagious almost, it's so easy to activate people with this kind of turn on for life, essentially. It's like you can really take this and start turning people on. Yeah.
So I think we kind of start to wrap it up. I'm very happy that I asked you this last question. Thank you very much for this conversation. That was very inspiring and also grounding, or like in a way it touched my heart. It feels very soft now. My heart feels very soft. Thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really, really a pleasure.